What gives our buildings their shape? And why do structures appear the way they do? When did these structures begin to say more about our culture, society, and human condition than the architecture and engineering that inform their shape? And what about the space above us and the space beneath us? What gives our structures their underlying form? What invisible forces are at work to establish a building envelope? Under what authority is this form legitimized? What gives zoning and land use its power? And ultimately, how is this power derived? Join me as we talk to seasoned professionals in our exploration of the concepts, places, and innovative approaches to land use, beginning right here in the heart of New York City. What motivates us to build? Perhaps it stems from our desire to prove to ourselves, we can do this.
I think land use is absolutely critical to our position as humans within the built environment.
Almost taunting the gods, really, that us mere mortals down here on Earth have an ability to shape our own environment. Our capacity to transcend ourselves has now reached a level never before attained. We are building more in this age than at any other time in world history, and something has to guide this development.
In real estate development and the built environment is about making something. We create our environment.
How today's zoning regulations test our limits to build higher, stronger, and faster offers us a guide how to temper our ambitions, while at the same time, when our technological advances tempt us to go beyond our limits. When we reach the precipice where we can no longer attain structurally stable heights, we will thrust ourselves out of this world, where the laws of motion will dictate alone what is limitless. New York, a city in constant change, a place that never remains idle. Since its Dutch origins, Manhattan has attracted commerce, power, and a diverse immigrant population from every corner of the planet, occupying a strategic location within a deep harbor. New York, perhaps more than any other place on Earth, since its founding, has been forced to deal with the tension caused by social change and the stirrings of economy, industry, and class hierarchy.
Perhaps nowhere else on Earth where land and even the air above it is so prized of an asset than here in Manhattan. Whether it's a 5-story walk-up, a medium or tall or super tall structure, we understand why. Land is in limited supply.
People buy an apartment and it has a view, and they're really excited. And then, of course, a few years later, another building is built, starts to block their view, another one blocks it. You say, wait a minute, I had that, you took my view away.
The sole motivation is the profit motive. I don't think the private sector is going to do it without some kind of regulatory overlay that sort of drives profit-making into the construction of housing.
Yet if you look carefully enough, you can find small treasures in the city.
These areas bring life, they bring character, and they bring an open sense of freshness to a city that's dense, and extremely urban.
One of the ways that we can use data is the most obvious is the geospatial data. So the specific topography, the land that we're using, the runoff, and how we might fit onto that footprint.
You can think of an urban area as a system of many interacting parts working together to achieve some set of objectives.
I'm here at the forecourt of the Hispanic Society, where you get a sense that you're in Paris, perhaps a European square. Why did the developers dedicate over 50% open coverage to the public domain?
All those things that we do are representations of our values in built form.
Was it to enhance the buildings surrounding them, or just a gesture to public goodwill?
It is through innovation and policies that New York arose in the 19th century out of the shadows of its colonial past to forge a new way cities would function in the modern world. The metropolis, lifeblood of civilization, all-encompassing, omnipresent, a mirror to our ambition, a representation of who we are, what we value, and our collective aspirations. By the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, New York emerges as a world city, taking in millions of immigrants annually and busting at its seams. The sweeping changes that transformed the city between 1916 and 1961 were mesmerizing. What happened in those 45 years? World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, automobiles and the beginning of the interstate highway system, mechanization of industry, commercial airlines, skyscrapers, and the shift in the American social contract, a New Deal and a new century. The rise of the suburban nation. After World War II, the United States embarked on the creation of the suburban landscape as a primary destination. No longer a secondary place of arrival for leisure, but the new living room for the booming 1950s American lifestyle. This movement reversed the inertia of development energy from the inner city and deflected it outward. In most major cities across the United States, there was a sense that the suburban landscape was the future, and the inner city represented the old way of living. What followed were decades of decay, neglect, crime, and a socialized system of low-income housing. The design, finance, and development industries all catered to this movement.
The architecture has been a tool or a device for popes, kings, dictators to create the environment that they want and express their power.
Forces that built the magnificent edifices began to alter the calculus of the city. Density begins to change. Mobility begins to define the city.
Land is finite, and without rules, we would have chaos.
The zoning here for the industrial uses of the meat packaging plants were rezoned in less than 1 week with the help of Robert Moses. The entire process, from initial decision on Friday, December 6th, to when the General Assembly met and voted to take that site across the street, was exactly 1 week.
He was like the king or the dictator, but he got things done.
Contextualism and the decentralization of local government. The unseating of centralized authority long held by power brokers. What would give way is a new social order.
The land use power, which is exercised at the local level, is exercised within the framework of a delegation of state power to the local level with the constraint that it be used for the general welfare.
Ambition is challenged by grassroots uprisings.
We want to be happy, but I think maybe even before that, we want to be safe. Because how can you be happy if you don't feel like you're safe, right?
Land use and zoning models began to address many social concerns.
My concern is fundamentally about having sufficient affordable housing, and we've got an enormous crisis Throughout the country, in New York, it's really pronounced.
A lot of buildings got built at 18 FAR in the 80s that failed because it was not driven by the market, but driven by this change in zoning, which was the down zone, and every developer wanted to protect his or her rights. What they did is they blew it all because they built these buildings that didn't lease because the market wasn't really ready for them. And the banks ended up with them, or the insurance companies, whoever financed it. So it was not a good move.
That was an artificial...
It was an artificial force driving it.
Until there's been some regulatory requirement that it be done, the private sector doesn't do it. It would take, I guess, a sort of a, an industry decision that we're going to go about this in some way. It's going to address not just the profit motive, but the human needs.
The United States is led by policies created in New York. And by the late 20th century, widespread adoption through state enabling acts turned the New York zoning model into a unified development code. With the acceptance of these zoning regulations, implementation spurs a stunning variety in new places around the world. City of tomorrow. How will zoning of the future become a tool for change?
The new tools that we have, which are huge, have to do with, of course, big data. And everybody talks about this and all this sort of thing, but nobody yet, we're in a very primitive state with all this. Nobody really knows where that's going.
There's a tendency to always want more regulation, to either protect things or to encourage.
We're moving from rigidity of regulations to flexibility of regulation.
Use of social media.
I would hate to think that decision-making would be reduced to the, Twitter 140-character question with then a like or or not like at the end of it.
And data-rich input to inform land use is emerging not as a possibility, but as a viable nation platform.
Big data is critical, but it has to be filtered through those time-honored, valued notions of place.
We're all scratching the surface, scratching the data, as it's called, to try to get a handle on this, and there's some progress being made.
Data bits and big data will be changing land use in profound ways in the future, and will begin to accelerate the pace of land use decisions and planning models.
I think used well, it can be an incredible resource for decision making. I think like a lot of people, I worry about, privacy and big data being big brother. Climate change is also a security issue that's going to affect land use. Our comfort as a civilization, needs to be taken into consideration.
People have weighed in over time about light, about air, about density, about use in a particular space.
Big data may actually help us more fully understand how we interact with our buildings and how they impact our daily lives, our commute to work, understanding the interplay with traffic, density, habitation, office, retail, and a number of mixed uses in our urban landscape. We must strive to seek and develop our community in a balance of private property rights with the good of the general public, and infuse a passion to work wisely, creatively, and effectively for the betterment of our built environment.